Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We get to say goodbye while she's sitting on the commode. It's just the most disgusting thing that Providence Healthcare can do to someone in their last hours and their family.
The family of a BC woman forced to transfer hospitals before she could get medical assistance in dying sues the province and a health authority, claiming its policy banning Maid violates patients' charter rights. Plus,
he was so kind and sweet and incredibly thoughtful.
a Nanaimo woman slams the BC Coroner service for not performing an autopsy after her husband suddenly died.
I haven't felt such rage in a long time.
And
They have a commercial down there and then resident, units up there.
It's a good place to live right now. It's close to everything.
from insurance to homes, the province buys ICBC's old headquarters on the North Shore with a plan to turn it into housing.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. The family of a Vancouver woman who was forced to transfer hospitals before she could receive medical assistance in dying, also known as Maid, is suing the BC government and Providence Healthcare. As Katie DeRosa reports, they claim the Catholic Health Authority's ban on Maid in its facilities violates patients' charter rights.
She just wanted to die with dignity.
Samantha O'Neill's parents say she had so much to live for before being diagnosed with terminal cancer in 2022.
She was an active, caring, loving, vegan marathoner. She had more friends than you could ever count. She had a lot to look forward to.
But when the young woman's cancer became too much to bear, she asked for medical assistance in dying, or Maid.
So for her to arrive at dying by Maid wasn't something that she wanted to do at 34 years old.
Because O'Neill was treated at St. Paul's Hospital, she was told she'd have to be transferred to a different facility. St. Paul's is operated by Providence Healthcare, a Catholic organization that opposes medical assistance in dying and does not allow it in its facilities, even though it receives public funding. Instead, O'Neill was taken to a hospice where staff from Vancouver Coastal Health would be able to administer her end-of-life medication. But she had to be sedated to the point of unconsciousness before they could take her.
We get to say goodbye while she's sitting on the commode. It's just the most disgusting thing that Providence Healthcare can do to someone in their last hours and their family.
O'Neill died on April 4th, 2023. Now, her family is suing the province and Providence Health, saying its policy banning Maid violates the charter rights of patients.
Forced transfers hurt people, and we don't want to see what happened to Sam happen to anybody else.
A Vancouver-based palliative care doctor who quit over Providence's ban on Maid is also part of the lawsuit.
The fundamental thing is Providence's religious beliefs are really being inflicted on me.
Jaya Raman says even though BC's health ministry is setting up a clinical space that allows Maid next to St. Paul's, forced transfers are still happening.
I've done 4 transfers this week, 4, all from St. Paul's. And these are very sick patients.
BC's health minister says he can't comment on O'Neill's case, but stresses the new clinical space will open up this fall.
But my concern is to ensure that everyone has very good access to service. That service will be provided by Vancouver Coastal Health, not Providence Healthcare.
Providence Health said in a statement it is reviewing the court filing to determine next steps. It says while Maid is not available in its facilities, it works with Vancouver Coastal Health to ensure patient requests for Maid are addressed. None of the allegations have been proven in court. Dying with Dignity Canada, a party to the lawsuit, says there are other faith-based agencies like Providence across Canada that also deny Maid services in their facilities. So a judgment here in BC could reverberate across the country. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
A Nanaimo woman is taking BC's Coroner service to task for not performing an autopsy after her husband unexpectedly died. The man who was diagnosed with epilepsy died suddenly at home. As John Hernandez explains, his wife wanted to donate his brain for research, but never got the chance.
instead of grieving, I was so stressed out about what was going to happen to his body. This one I took just a few days before he passed away.
Frustrations and sorrow afflict Nanaimo's Anastasia Waddell. The love of her life, Drew Madsen, died earlier this year.
Drew was so kind and sweet and incredibly thoughtful.
Madsen was diagnosed with epilepsy over a decade ago. It took them years to figure out what part of his brain was causing problems. He was a candidate for brain surgery, but in March, he suffered a seizure. After he seemed to recover, he went to take a nap.
He told me that he loved me, and then he went to sleep.
Waddell later went to give Drew his medicine, but he never woke up.
I knew he was gone, and I knew it was too late to do CPR. Because you can't CPR your way out of brain death.
Drew is believed to have died of SUDEP, or sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. Its cause is unknown and research is limited.
We don't understand exactly what happens, but we think of it as the brain shutting down after a seizure, breathing gets affected, and then eventually the heart as well gets affected.
Waddell wanted to donate her husband's brain to the SUDEP registry for research. Tissue removals are typically done at autopsy.
Drew's brain would have been invaluable because it was sudden and it was exactly what they would have needed to study.
Autopsy requests were made by Drew's specialist, family doctor, and by Waddell, but it was ultimately denied by the coroner's service.
I haven't felt such rage in a long time. I could not understand why they would say no to that. It's a fatal medical event that bears research.
Earlier this year, a CBC News analysis found BC's autopsy rate has steadily declined since the early 90s, dropping from 22% in 1991 to just 3.2% in 2022. At the time, the coroner's service said mounting overdose deaths are to blame for the declining numbers.
We need to understand what's different about the people who die from SUDEP.
This SUDEP investigator who we reached in New York City says the lack of autopsies poses the biggest barrier when it comes through securing brain donations.
If the autopsy is not performed for religious reasons, because the medical examiner or coroner's office is just too busy with the drug epidemic, many of them just don't have capacity. And so we often don't get the information as to even basic findings.
After Waddell wrote a complaint to BC's Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth, he responded, saying, "Please accept my sincere condolences for your loss. I have taken the issues you raised in your letter to BC Coroner's Service senior leadership. She hopes the acknowledgement leads to change."
I don't want any other families to go through that. It was traumatizing and heartbreaking.
The coroner's service wouldn't comment specifically on Waddell's case, but said medical deaths at home don't meet investigation criteria. Waddell has a meeting scheduled with coroner's service leaders this week. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Surrey RCMP says it and homicide investigators are now looking into the killing of a woman on the north side of the city late Sunday night. Mounties say they were called to a home near 98th and 182 A Street in Port Kills near the Fraser River around 10 p.m. for a report of a woman with life-threatening injuries. She was rushed to hospital and later died. Police say they did arrest a man nearby with the help of some police dogs. It's not yet clear how he may be connected to the victim. Meanwhile, Vancouver police say they are looking into the stabbing death of a man on the downtown east side last week. Investigators say they believe the victim was attacked near East Hastings and Dunleavy Streets. He was then found 2 blocks away near Gore Avenue and East Pender in Chinatown shortly after 1 p.m. on June 12th. Police have identified him as 40-year-old William James Coffin. The VPD says it arrested 2 suspects that same day. They've since been released as officers keep looking for clues. Airbnb operators have appeared in court in Victoria to try to preserve their operations as part of a petition against the province and the city. Short-term rentals like those listed on Airbnb have been restricted under Victoria bylaws since 2018. And in April, the province announced it would ban most short-term rentals that are not at an owner's principal residence. Enforcement against non-complying short-term units started May 1st in order to free up space for the housing market.
Legislation cancels existing vested rights. It didn't take into consideration that people had been operating for years under municipality zoning and rules.
Property owners in Victoria cannot rent homes for fewer than 30 days without a short-term rental license from the city. Heads up for students in Vancouver. The school board has now updated its rules to restrict personal digital devices like cell phones and tablets on school grounds. Starting July 1st, students from kindergarten to grade 7 will soon have to keep their phones, if they have one, out of sight at school. An email on Friday from the school district to student families said the devices must be silent and out of sight from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., including during recess and lunch. In North Vancouver, a big and partly empty building is set to get a new purpose. The BC government says it plans to turn the old ICBC headquarters in Lonsdale into a mix of market and below-market housing. As Michelle Morton shows us, the province says it will create several hundred new homes.
This ICBC building in Lower Lonsdale is getting new life. The Crown Corporation is moving its operations to Vancouver's False Creek Flats by May of 2027. On Monday, Premier David Eby announced the province has bought this 300,000 square foot building with plans to turn it into housing.
Once ICBC moves their last employees over to VCC Clark so that we can get started right away. At this point, the best we can say is we're expecting hundreds of units of housing on this site. It will depend on the planning and the work that we have yet to do.
But Eby did not specify how many units there will be.
I'm okay with it. It's all empty now, so it's hopefully it'll go to, people that can afford to live in the neighborhood. And yeah, it's a good place to live right now. It's close to everything.
I think it's really good to have a mixed diversity of housing in the area. It just helps with real estate costs, it helps support everybody and just make sure people have a place to live.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Because look at those, they have a commercial down there and then resident, units up there, so I guess. And they said the lack of housing, so.
One UBC business professor says underused real estate near transit is totally appropriate for an apartment tower.
So the basics is it's a home run.
But he says the key will be the split between the market and below market units.
But the best thing to do for the province would be to make these market rate rentals and use the proceeds to fund allowances for households that are really suffering. But I'll be interested to see what the mix actually is.
Eby says purchasing the ICBC North Shore headquarters is part of the province's $394 million commitment to deliver 10,000 homes near transit in the next 10 to 15 years. This development next to the Lonsdale Quay Market is the government's third transit-oriented announcement in recent months. The other two are in Port Moody and Saanich. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
People gathered in New Brighton Park in northeastern Vancouver to mark a grim event. This year marks the 66th anniversary of the Second Narrows Bridge collapse, one of our region's worst industrial disasters. On June 17, 1958, a support collapsed, toppling the bridge still being built between Vancouver and the North Shore. 79 workers plunged into Burrard Inlet, some of them falling hundreds of feet into the water. 23 people were killed in that disaster, most of them iron workers.
Your presence underscores our collective dedication to remember the legacy of these workers and to contribute to a culture of proactive collective safety, where every worker returns home safe at the end of the day.
There had been few safety precautions for the workers. A royal commission later established that 2 engineers who were both killed in the crash had miscalculated the temporary support beams that had given way. It was renamed the Ironworkers Memorial Second Narrows Bridge in 1994. Thousands of people from the Sikh community in BC are gathering over the coming days to mark a somber anniversary. It's been nearly 1 year since the murder of high-profile separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar, shot to death outside his Surrey Gurdwara. Since then, diplomatic relations between Canada and India have been strained. As Sarab Sandhu reports, many from the community came together over the weekend to reflect and pray.
Pyara Singh Nijjar sits among a large crowd at the same Surrey Gurdwara where his son Hardeep Singh Nijjar was shot to death last year. On Sunday, Nijjar's father was honored for his son's contribution to the community. and for his activism in support of an independent Sikh homeland.
The reaction from the congregation was like very emotional. They chanted his name.
Members from all over North America, Europe, to commemorate the life of Shaheed Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
On June 18, 2023, Nijjar was gunned down as he was leaving this Surrey Gurdwara parking lot. His killing sparked widespread protests across the country. After Prime Minister Justin Trudeau publicly alleged the Indian government may have been involved in the Sikh leader's murder, which the country has denied on several occasions. The day-long memorial comes on the heels of Trudeau's brief conversation with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at last week's G7 summit in Italy, the first interaction since the accusations.
I'm not going to get into the details of this issue. There's important but sensitive issues that we need to follow up on. But this was a commitment to work together in the coming times.
Last month, Mounties arrested 4 Indian nationals in connection with Nijjar's murder. Some of their oversized mugshots now on display outside the Surrey Gurdwara. For Maninder Singh and many here, potential Indian involvement is top of mind.
The violence we'd known had been always kind of contained to the Indian subcontinent, and now if they've arrived at our doorsteps, at our places of worship, at our homes here in Canada,
leaving many worried for their safety.
We need to get justice, we need to get closure, and we need to alleviate the risks that are continued to be faced by Sikhs in Canada.
Singh expects thousands will be gathering on Tuesday to mark the one-year anniversary of Nijjar's death. He says it's an opportunity for community members to come together and reflect on the past year. Sohrab Sandhu, CBC News, Surrey.
The BC Wildfire Service says recent rain has helped in the fight against wildfires.
It does reduce fire behavior in the short term, allowing firefighters to make even more progress along those priority areas on the fire perimeter and then along major transportation routes and corridors. So there are several challenges that do remain, specifically the extreme drought. We're in a drought that has been kind of prolonged over the past 2 years, so that certainly makes firefighting efforts quite challenging.
She says the Patrick Creek and Parker Lake wildfires near Fort Nelson are no longer out of control. But with a spell of dry days ahead, she says fire activity will pick up. Still, they're not expecting significant growth. For now, fire crews are focusing on protecting power lines and other critical infrastructure near the out-of-control Noga Creek fire east of Fort Nelson. Meanwhile, those cool conditions have helped douse wildfire threats in the Prince George Fire Centre. Still, crews are staying vigilant.
The focus right now, I would say the majority of fire activity through our fire center is in the northeast section. We do have initial TAC crews ready for any new starts to go put out any new fires started that we might see with lightning strikes or human caused. But we are also working on pre-existing holdover fires.
Province-wide, there are more than 100 active wildfires, roughly 90 of which are in the Prince George Fire Centre. Let's bring in Darius Madavi for a first look at the weather, and he's got a very familiar map for us. What's the danger level now?
Not so familiar, Dan, because the fire danger has dropped.
Thank
goodness. It's going to be the first time in a while we haven't seen this area up here being a mix of, oranges and reds, and so that's a little bit of good news. The cooler, wetter weather has improved things a little bit across the province. Fire danger is down, as you said, Dan, for now. As temperatures continue to climb into the rest of the week, I would expect that this is going to become a lot more yellow and orange, but for now, a little bit of good news and a little bit of relief across the province. So a little bit of relief there. But that's especially good news because right now we've got some thunderstorms rolling across the interior, and they could be having fire starts if it wasn't for the fact that things are fairly wet, which is nice. Here across the south coast, not too much activity happening. A few wind warnings and such, but nothing too bad. That moved really quickly. In terms of there's a severe thunderstorm watch for parts of the southern interior. Be aware of that. I'm sure people who are in those areas are very familiar with that fact because especially in some places like just near Salmon Arm and Kamloops, There have been some severe downpours associated with those thunderstorms as they've rolled through. There was a severe thunderstorm warning earlier, but that's been dropped now as those storms have dropped out of some of the more populated areas. But be aware, if you're in the Okanagan or the Thompson, those things could still pop up pretty easily at any time, especially if you're at some of those higher elevations. So even out here, out east a little bit further in Revelstoke and Golden, be aware of that. That risk returning tomorrow. We'll talk more about that later this hour. For now, Dan, be ready for, here in Vancouver, a fairly calm night as those clouds clear out.
Okay, Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now, if you are keen to get outdoors and wondering about crowds, though, now you can check the parking situation for 2 of Metro Vancouver's busiest green spaces before you go. The pilot project will give real-time parking information to people traveling to Boundary Bay Regional Park in Tawasin and Iona Beach Regional Park in Richmond. You can check online to make sure parking lots are not too full before you head there. Officials hope it encourages more people to carpool, bike, or take transit to and from the parks. Metro Vancouver will consider expanding the technology to other parks after this pilot. Up next, we're looking at how people in BC live with loss. We're going to speak with our medical columnist about how doctors work to support patients and their loved ones through times of grief. You'll want to hear this. This week, we are going to be looking at how British Columbians live with loss and grief. Now, for some, doctors play a big role in this, supporting patients, their families, loved ones, and others through often very hard times, and sometimes to the end of lives. CBC health columnist Dr. Melissa Lem joins us for more. Thanks for joining us. A family doctor, you may be part of a group of medical care providers who are helping people navigate some very difficult times. Maybe it's also you on your own. What goes into that process?
Well, it depends on where you live and what access to resources you have in that community. But as a family doctor, I think the most important thing that I can do to be part of that team is to just be available for my patient when they have concerns or questions about their care, whether it's their physical health or really in particular their mental health. I can help just kind of navigate that for them. And I think that longitudinal relationship is really important at that stage of life because they often will have issues coping with things or they have questions about how to move forward with their care. I often refer patients to specialists, and the consultation note comes back saying they want to discuss their care plan with their family doctor before they make any decisions. And the reason for that is because we are both experts in medical care, but also experts in our own patients. And that ability to provide care from cradle to grave is really a big responsibility, but also a big privilege.
What about when you speak with, perhaps if they come in with a loved one, whether it's a spouse or a child or another person, how do you navigate this process with that person who is living with somebody who may be nearing the end of their life, but is not dying themselves?
Well, it really depends on the needs of the family. Sometimes they do need more support psychologically, but other times they sort of want to take care of themselves and kind of navigate that care on their own. But I will say within a big city, for example, in my practice here in Vancouver, we often do have access to palliative care teams. And in that case, my role will be to kind of absorb what the recommendations are and help answer their questions about the plan and then help them come up with decisions. When I'm in a smaller community, though, sometimes I practice rurally. Sometimes there really isn't access to that specialized care team. And what I'll often do is I'll make a home visit to the patient to assess their entire situation and help direct their care. So I think as family doctors, really, we respond to the needs of the patients in different situations.
When you are working with other healthcare providers, what goes into the coordination? Because not only are you dealing with a lot of emotion perhaps from a patient, but having them navigate this with highly specialized people and equipment, that kind of thing.
Well, if you think about their overall medical care team as a symphony, really the family doctor is the conductor. Because if you don't have someone coordinating all the care, receiving all the different notes and input from different specialists on their team, things really start to get messy. And so it's really what we do at other points in their life. If they have a complex medical situation, whether it's an end of life or a chronic disease, we really just help coordinate everything that's going on for that patient.
And if and when a patient of yours does die, do you keep in touch with loved ones, if I can ask? And what do you, and why?
Well, I have had situations where a patient of mine has died unexpectedly, and that means that they haven't had the chance to give consent for their family members to be involved in their care or also to share their medical records. And I will have a family member sometimes reach out to me wanting to talk about what happened. And I will always take those phone calls because it does provide a lot of comfort for a family member to hear from someone who cared for their loved one, even though our regulatory guidelines say that we can't actually divulge confidential medical information without consent. And I think one of those other benefits is that sometimes their loved ones are also my patients because it's the whole family that I'm taking care of. So if I'm coming up with ways to support them or also just those difficult conversations, I hold their collective family and medical and social histories in my mind while I'm providing that care. And that's why I think it's really important for us to work towards everyone in BC to have a family doctor so they can have access to that high quality of care throughout their entire life experience.
We appreciate your time and your expertise as always, Dr. Melissa Lem. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dan.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the issue of foreign interference in Canadian politics crosses party lines. More on that story after this. Police in Toronto are revealing new details about a deadly shooting that killed 3 people and sparked the evacuation of a nearby daycare. Thomas Dagla has more on the anxious moments for the children, parents, and daycare workers caught in the chaos.
Young children were carefully led away from their daycare late in the afternoon under the watchful eye of police. Word of a deadly shooting in the same building in Toronto's North York area sent worried parents scrambling to pick up their toddlers.
I'm thankful that at the daycare he was kept safe. They kept the babies all safe. It was just a nerve-wracking experience.
Very glad to be with my son.
Police swarmed the area and deployed heavily armed tactical units to clear the building after investigators say 3 adults were shot and killed inside an office lobby. Amid the chaos and uncertainty, one nearby elementary school was put in lockdown.
I had a lot of anxiety. I just showed up. I was driving when the messages went out to the daycare, so I didn't know that when I turned down the street and just to see all the cars, and I didn't know what school it was or if it was the daycare. There you go, bud.
3 hours after the shooting, police confirmed all children from the daycare and school had been reunited with their caregiver. Daycare staff doing their best to keep parents reassured about their children.
They're perfectly fine. They have no clue what's happening. They didn't know until we exited the door that we just informed them there's going to be a whole bunch of police officers.
Charles Beniaz works in the same building. He says he heard an argument and 2 loud bangs. He later called 911, and when police arrived, he says he heard half a dozen gunshots.
The police was outside, but apparently when he saw the police was here, he started shooting. And that's when it happened, I guess.
Thomas Dagla reporting from Toronto. The Prime Minister says the issue of foreign interference in Canadian politics crosses party lines. Justin Trudeau gave an exclusive interview tonight with David Cochrane on CBC's Power and Politics. As Olivia Stefanovich reports, he's responding to recent bombshell allegations that some parliamentarians have helped foreign states.
We know that foreign actors are trying to interfere in all different parties in many different ways.
The Prime Minister on the defense about his government's response to foreign interference.
Don't you as Prime Minister kind of owe it to the country to clear up exactly how compromised the Parliament may or may not be at this point in time?
But that's exactly why we called a public inquiry.
In an exclusive interview with CBC Power and Politics host David Cochrane, Justin Trudeau was asked repeated questions about a national security and intelligence report alleging some unnamed parliamentarians have acted on behalf of foreign states.
Jagmeet Singh has said that there's nobody in his caucus he needs to worry about. Can you say the same thing with comfort and clarity?
I hadn't known that Jagmeet said that. I would be wary of any party leader drawing any sort of conclusion like that.
So far, 2 opposition leaders received national security clearance to read the unredacted findings, generating 2 starkly different reactions.
I am vastly relieved.
I'm not relieved at all, nor, in fact, I am more disturbed.
Prompting Green Party co-leader Elizabeth May to clarify her position.
I don't want to, for any reason at all, create impressions for Canadians that Mr. Singh and I disagree on the contents.
The Prime Minister pointing to the confusion as one of the reasons all opposition leaders should read the full report themselves.
Mr. Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party, is choosing to not read the classified report, not get the security cleared so he can actually engage on a substantive, fact-based approach on the issue of foreign interference that everyone needs to take seriously.
The Conservative leader's office says Pierre Poilievre would welcome a briefing if Canada's spy agency has concerns about his party or caucus. So far, that hasn't happened. And as for Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet, he's still waiting for his security clearance. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
At least 15 people have been killed in eastern India after a freight train hit a passenger train. Officials say the freight train driver ignored a signal and rammed into the back of the other train that was stopped. 3 train cars were pushed off the rails into a massive pileup. One was left nearly vertical. Rescuers are now combing through that debris for survivors as more people are feared trapped inside the massive wreckage. As Russia keeps up its relentless airstrikes across Ukraine, some war-weary residents are forced to carve out some sense of normalcy as the violence drags on. Briar Stewart visited the northern city or region of Kharkiv, where thousands of children attend underground schools while near daily Russian attacks continue overhead.
The wailing siren has become part of the backdrop to life here in Kharkiv, which is why people simply keep walking right on by this bomb shelter. Kharkiv lies 30 kilometers from Russia, and it's now being brutally targeted. You can still smell the aftermath of the horror that unfolded here. 2 Russian bombs struck this mall on a Saturday afternoon in May, killing at least 19 people. Among them, friends of Konstantin Svirakov. I saw people screaming and everything was exploding, he said. It was terrible. The threat has driven some underground. Schools have moved into metro stations. This kindergarten is one of several across the city.
In addition to arts and crafts and starting to learn the basics of reading, these children also receive lessons in security, such as what to do during an air raid siren and how to identify a landmine.
For these children, the war would be some of their earliest memories.
How does it make you feel sometimes when you hear the air raid siren?
Страшно. Ну, страшно. It's scary, she says. We always hide with my mom in the corridor, says another little girl. While the war can still feel close on the streets of Kharkiv, Ukraine's military has been able to stabilize the front in this region for now. In an undisclosed location near the city, we meet Yuri Fedorenko, a commander of a drone unit.
How worried are you about the next couple of months?
So, because противник enemy have very good military.
Part of his unit's gear, armored personnel carriers made by a Canadian company, Rochelle.
How long have you had these Canadian vehicles?
8 months, maybe.
But he jokes they've had to fix it maybe 100 times because the vehicles have difficulty handling the country's bumpy roads. He says Ukraine is grateful for all of the help, but says it will need even more in order to try and push Russian forces back. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Kharkiv.
So-called dumb phones are now having a moment. The retro mobile devices lack the bells and whistles of a smartphone, certainly. And as Nisha Patel shows us, they're becoming more popular, though, with younger people looking for fewer distractions.
She's got her school schedule.
When Lee Tynan agreed to get her 13-year-old daughter a cell phone, she didn't want it to become a distraction.
When there's a smartphone or a screen, you don't practice guitar, you don't read a book, you don't just be bored. Hello?
She spent about $80 on a flip phone. It allows talk and text, but no social media.
And then I just thought I really don't feel comfortable with her being online all the time.
Known as dumb phones, simple phones, or even boring phones, these basic models seem to be making a comeback. Sales in Canada grew by 25% in 2023 compared to the year before.
The smartphone is not a source of enjoyment anymore. It used to be fun, but now they're addicted to it. So they want to go back to simpler times, using a simpler device.
The company that makes Nokia phones has relaunched a model from 20 years ago.
It's really interesting to see like a phone that many thought was done with, like we would never use this phone again, and now it's being picked up.
We're humans who are taking back our lives.
The Light phone is also trying to cash in on the demand. Its version has a more modern design, a black and white screen, and no connection to the internet. The company is in talks with TELUS and hopes to bring the phone to Canada later this year. Though iPhone and Android devices still make up the overwhelming majority of new phone sales in North America.
Right now I'm using the F22.
Kristen Campbell has made the switch.
I just felt a lot calmer and a lot happier, and I just get to live my life in the place where I am at that moment rather than constantly being mentally elsewhere.
For her, getting a dumb phone was the smart move. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Record temperatures are blasting some southern American states and are expected to hit eastern Canada later this week. Those details next. The official start of summer is still a few days away, but heat records are already being forecast across much of North America.
We want to be clear, this is extremely hot for June, and New Yorkers should not underestimate the heat.
The Big Apple may become the baked apple. Forecasts indicate temperatures will likely hit 40 degrees Celsius in New York, and the U.S. is expected to see as many as 200 new heat records over the coming days. Hot weather is also moving across central Canada, with heat warnings in place for a large swath of Ontario, Quebec as well. Quebec and New Brunswick can also expect high heat and humidity later in the week. Extreme heat is also prompting serious concern about athletes' health ahead of the Paris Summer Olympics, expected to be one of the hottest games on record. Susan Ormiston has more on the measures some athletes are taking to face the dangers.
The Tokyo Olympics were the hottest ever, up to 34 degrees and 70% humidity. Paris could be as bad or worse.
I think there's a fatal risk, because as an athlete you are programmed to push your body to the absolute limits, and yeah, athletes aren't going to pull back. So if we are competing in these hotter conditions, yeah, it's definitely scary.
Last summer, blistering heat in France killed 5,000 people. Last month was the hottest on record globally, and Europe is the fastest warming continent. Athletes and scientists are ringing an alarm bell. In a new report, Rings of Fire 2, Sebastian Coe, 4-time Olympic medalist, says climate change should be viewed as an existential threat to sport. Heat plus humidity plus exertion can cause nausea, cramps, even heat stroke.
35 degrees. And yeah, I've felt as the temperature got up, it's got steadily harder and harder.
We really need to be asking ourselves, are we pushing them too far? Are we putting them into situations that are too dangerous?
The Paris Organizing Committee has vowed these games will be the greenest ever. So no air conditioning in the athletes' village, built instead with sunshades and in-floor cooling. But heat is such a worry, some teams are considering bringing their own portable AC.
In and out of the front.
I am really bad in the heat. Canadian rower Jenny Casson says Olympic organizers should weigh climate effects significantly.
I don't think it's as simple anymore as choosing the country with the highest bid. You have to weigh in other factors, or else you're not going to have the games. Like, you're going to have athletes who are barely alive and unable to perform at their best.
The report recommends adjusting timing or venues and less interest in oil and gas sponsors. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Toronto.
Darius Madavi joins us with our BC wet weather picture, and those are going to be some hot games.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I thought it was really cool that they said there's no air conditioning in the village, just geothermal, heating and cooling, one system for all of it. I know it's expensive to put it in the first place, but very effective beyond that. So that's really cool.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, you're right. Let's hope that people also in Ontario might consider that in the near future, because we've got a heat wave affecting much of eastern Canada, as you mentioned before, Dan. High pressure system, heat dome actually sitting over parts of the U.S., and that is really bringing those temperatures up across parts of Ontario as well. Also driving some thunderstorm activity, as you can see here. We've got extreme heat warnings across Ontario and Quebec, as well as some severe thunderstorm warnings. You can see that major storm running through there with those high temperatures, the ground heating up so fast. You got the ideal conditions for thunderstorms to form and all that energy that they need to really get going. So you can see there extremely strong thunderstorms racing through there. Keeping on that over the next few days, I expect to see more thunderstorms as these temperatures continue to climb over the next few days. These are just the base temperatures, doesn't make account for humidity. You know, many parts of BC, we don't have to deal with that as much, but it's a real concern out there. So we'll keep an eye on that over the next few days. For now, if we turn to BC, also a little bit of interesting news I want to talk about here, where we do have, there we go, wind records on the island as well, and here in Vancouver. The windiest May and early June ever recorded for Vancouver, Pitt Meadows, Abbotsford, as well as the second windiest in Victoria, although we moved off that pretty quickly. And if we move over to the Okanagan as well and the Thompson, also some temperature record, or a wind record set here. Windiest May and early June for Kelowna ever, and fourth in Kamloops, fourth in Penticton. So very windy start. If you noticed that, then, and you're one of the people that emailed me to say, has it been windier than usual? It has, if you're one of those places. So, yeah, just had a storm track going right through the central coast, and that really brought those winds here on the coast and throughout southern BC. So in terms of the forecast, it's a pretty calm one. We've got that precipitation and cloud clearing out across BC. Some convective activity is still expected for more southern parts of the province and maybe the northwest as well over the next few days as these temperatures do continue to climb back up. Once again, recovering into the end of this week, getting back to seasonal and then even above seasonal for the end of this week. Maybe some showers returning for the coast this weekend possibly, but I think it's too early to say that for sure. And for now, let's hold out hope for some sunshine here on the coast. Again, convective activity throughout much of the southern parts of the province and up in the northwest tomorrow, so be aware of that. And if we zoom in for our 5-day forecast here in Vancouver, lots of sunshine on the way as those temperatures continue to climb. And we've got a very nice sunny week ahead, a beautiful weekend. Dan.
And it's Monday. So what happens now?
Oh, I think we should take a deep breath.
Okay, let's do it. Glad that promo's not longer.
Yeah, that was a nice long breath.
Okay, so time to spread some cheer, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so you read this bit.
No, okay, yeah.
Okay.
So researchers at UBC have come up with a new way for people that have diabetes to get their insulin, which is a huge deal because at the moment, insulin requires you to inject yourself as much as 3 to 4 times a day, which is a really big deal. Now, insulin was a huge breakthrough when it first was developed, but now we are trying to develop better ways to get it into the body, and they've created a peptide guide that if you put these drops right under your tongue, can get that insulin right into your body, getting it, even though it's a really difficult thing to do, which is really incredible for the 11.7 million Canadians that have diabetes or prediabetes. So a huge deal around the world.
Let's hope it works very quickly. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Well, Kelowna played host to a Canadian Premier League game in a big win for the city's sporting future. You'll want to see this.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC is the proud media partner of the Squamish Nation Youth Powwow, July 5th to the 7th. The cultural event welcomes everyone to a vibrant celebration of vivid colors, rhythmic music, and a strong sense of community. Tickets at SquamishNationYouthPowwow.com. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter and keep connected with us.
Thousands of soccer fans turned out in Kelowna to watch two Canadian Premier League teams battle it out on Sunday. The match marked homecoming for one former Canadian national team player whose passion for soccer started there.
And as Brady Strachan shows us, the buzz surrounding the game has the league exploring the idea of expanding it to Kelowna.
Hey, 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 we are... From the die-hard Vancouver FC loyalists traveling to support their team to the thousands of local fans getting their first taste, Kelowna is buzzing with excitement for professional soccer.
I just like the crowd, the people, and the cheering. This is fun. We don't usually have stuff like this happen.
Two rival franchises in the Canadian Premier League kicked off a match in Kelowna on Sunday, part of a touring schedule for the 6-year-old professional soccer league. The goal, to branch out to Canadians in smaller markets and gauge the fan interest in Kelowna for possible league expansion.
Yeah, it's special. It's a surreal day. I didn't sleep last night.
Former Canadian national player Rob Friend got his soccer start right here. He's spearheading the push to bring the CPL to his hometown, and he says the 6,000 plus in attendance for this match is a promising sign.
This city is a sports city. It's always been. They support their sports teams. And again, soccer's grown so fast here that, I think it'd be a great market for a summer professional team here.
It's an idea city leaders like Mayor Tom Dias are excited about. The league says Kelowna would need to build a stadium to seat 6,000 or 7,000 fans, the locals and the diehards who travel to watch their team, like Ian Racine, who flew in for the match from Calgary.
Love to see it. Kelowna and the whole valley of the Okanagan. It would be amazing to have it. You've got a nice sized little stadium here. It'll be great. And build. The
high-level competition fueled the excitement in the stands and along the sidelines, with many fans eager for more.
This is a great idea. You can see the support.
I think it's an all-around thing for the town.
Hopefully my kids can be inspired and play the game as well.
And although the match ended up in a tie, the real winners on this day were the fans, proving that soccer spirit is alive and well in Kelowna. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
That's cool to see. And nothing like playing soccer in the rain. If you lived here and where you grew up, you did that too, didn't you?
I did in Ontario, yeah.
There you go.
The best part was the orange slices.
Oh, obviously.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And Jessica Chung will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Join you then. Good night.